It's Thursday, June 12th, 2025, and we are expecting widespread severe weather across the United States today, with focuses surrounding southeastern Texas stretching up into the Mississippi River Valley, central Georgia stretching up into the Appalachian Mountains, a small isolated risk area in the northern mid-Atlantic, and then our main risk area today, our slight risk, is going to be in the central to northern plains with a marginal stretching down into the high plains convergence zone. Today's threat is going to be a mostly wind risk with a 5% marginal risk in all of our marginal risk areas, as well as that 15% slight risk of wind up in our central to northern plains, up in Nebraska and southern South Dakota. And then hail really isn't going to be much of a concern, except there's a 15% slight risk up in our main slight risk area today. And then our day 2 outlook for Friday certainly looks interesting with a very large slight risk draped across the western, central to northern plains. This is expected to bring mostly a wind and hail threat with a isolated threat for tornadoes. Here's our simulated reflectivity for our central to northern plains risk area, and we can see that we get our first hint of storms around 1 p.m., so around midday, and then these are expected to develop with the first hint of that severe nature really becoming present around the early to mid-afternoon, and then these are going to push southward with a scattered line of storms up here near the Nebraska and South Dakota border, but our main wind line is going to be pushing into central Nebraska around 9 to 10 p.m. And then these storms are expected to sort of deteriorate later into the night around 1 a.m. on Friday. Here's our southeastern Texas into the Mississippi River Valley risk area, and we can see that we have a large ongoing mesoscale convective system down there in southeastern Texas, but the low pressure system associated with this mesoscale convective system is expected to continue to produce severe weather up into the Mississippi River Valley, where I think the greatest area of concern associated with this is going to be in southern to northern Arkansas as this Boeing line of storm sort of develops, and that is also where I think the greatest tornado threat is going to be today. This is going to push forward, bringing all hazards of severe weather through the night, and is going to kind of cool down into the later hours around 10 p.m. And then lastly, our mid-Atlantic region, we are expecting some weather up here near the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. An interesting thing on our mid-Atlantic risk area is that our convective allowing models have really shied away from any development of storms up there in that northern mid-Atlantic risk area, but it has progressed with the development of storms down here in our northern Georgia to Appalachian Mountains risk area with a mostly scattered to unorganized, sort of weak nature to them. Here is our upper air dynamics, which is going to be the main cause of that weather today. We can see that we have a large shortwave digging in here with a associated low situated around central to eastern Kansas, and that is going to provide lift and some forcing for those storms down here in southeastern Texas to the Mississippi River Valley, as well as that sort of scattered nature out here in Georgia and the Appalachian Mountains. Another thing we see is we have some ridging down here in Colorado, and then we have a shortwave up here in Montana. And what's going to happen is that upper air winds are going to be squeezed by the high pressure and that shortwave, kind of creating an area of enhanced northerly flow, which is going to be associated with that wind and hail threat there later and possibly provide some of that larger scale forcing for storms. And then over in our northern mid-Atlantic area, we certainly have enhanced flow over this region. So that is why the Storm Prediction Center has outlined an area of concern for that region today, but our convective allowing models are sort of trending away from that risk of severe weather up there. This is a weather sounding from our central to northern plains risk area today, and immediately in our photograph we can see that we do not have very much deep layers shear, which is one of the reasons why these storms are not expected to organize themselves and become strong and really produce an enhanced threat for severe weather today. However, we do see some vertical shear, we see some wind veering, we see higher LCLs, good lapse rates, and we see a lot of downdraft cape despite our precipitable water being quite low, which is definitely going to help bring that enhanced wind risk today. We also see some dry air aloft, helping with that lift of storms. And we do see some capping, although not a super large amount. Our instability is going to be sufficient for storms up here, as well as kind of a decent amount of instability up near our freezing level, along with our high lapse rates and the mix level, which is going to help produce that slight 15% risk of hail today. And then this is a sounding from our Mississippi River Valley to southeastern Texas risk area around the evening hours, so around 7 p.m. And this is when the low level jet is really going to start to kick in. And we can see here we get a decent curve in our lower levels, even though our upper level shear is still going to be weak. We get enhanced helicity, albeit it is still below 100. And then our low level shear is going to still be lower. And then our upper level shear is going to remain low. So those storms are going to struggle to get organized and are going to really have to rely on the ingredients in that low pressure system behind them today to keep them going. But I think this is when that tornado risk is going to maximize in central Arkansas, because not only do we get the section of the Boeing line where it kind of bends back on itself, but our shear is going to be most enhanced at this time. That's when that KLCS threat for spent tornadoes will kind of maximize today, albeit the threat is still pretty low. We see lower LCLs, which could make that 2% marginal tornado threat realized. We see some drier air aloft, which is going to help with the lift for those storms, although we do see pretty low lapse rates and pretty low mix level CAPE, which is why that hail threat out there is pretty much zero. However, we do see a decent amount of CAPE overall, definitely enough for storms to get going, and we do see 1.73 inches of precipitable water, which could kind of increase that wind threat, but our downdraft CAPE is not super high, along with our lapse rates and other ingredients required for that wind threat to be realized.